الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. For those of you who have the book, we are in page 161 in the chapter in your fasting, and we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to gather in this blessed night of Isra and Mi'raj. Tonight is a special night, the night of the 27th of Rajab. So we take this opportunity to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah bless in this gathering, and may Allah answer our prayers and forgive our sins and open for us doors of understanding. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. In our last lesson, we spoke about the meaning of fasting, and then we spoke about intention and the difference between intention for performing fasting that is compulsory and fasting that is a sunnah. And we spoke about a few things that invalidate fasting. So we have come into the part where the author mentioned وَلَا يُعْذَرُ الْجَاهِلُ إِلَّا إِنْ قَرُبَ عَهْدُهُ بِالْإِسْلَامِ أو نشأ ببادية بعيدة عن العلماء. This is in page 160. I believe this is where we stop, right? ولا يفتر بغبار الطريق وإن تعمد فتح فمه. Yani the author mentioned that if a person is ignorant, yani he doesn't know, then he cannot eat and drink. So we have to access in this person. Is he an ignorant person that is excused or not excused? So in Islam, any ignorance there are of two types. One, any ignorance is excuse. The other, ignorance is not any excuse. An example of ignorance that is excused: if a person lives far from the scholars, in a place where he cannot seek knowledge. So if he is ignorant, he is excused because he doesn't have the means to seek knowledge. This is situation number one. Number two, the author mentioned, is if a person just enter into the fold of Islam. If a person just entered into the fold of Islam and he or she doesn't know that you cannot eat and drink, and she fasts and she eats and she drinks, she does not know, this is forgiven. This kind of ignorance is forgiven because why? She just entered into the fold of Islam. He or she doesn't have the time to seek knowledge. So this is the meaning of ignorance that is excused. Either a person lives far away from the ulama, or a person is new into Islam. Otherwise, it is not excused. If a person is a Muslim, born Muslim, and lives in a community where he can seek knowledge, but he does not seek knowledge, and then he does something that breaks the fast, and he says, I don't know. We say this is ignorance that is not excuse, because you did not seek knowledge, that is your fault. If a person in Singapore, for example, he lives in Singapore, and he said, I didn't know that fasting actually you cannot eat. I thought you cannot drink only. And we say to this person, your fasting is invalidated if you have eaten. Because this is not an excuse. Because you live in a place where you can seek knowledge. In Singapore, people can seek knowledge. But if a person lives in Amazon jungle, or if a person lives in the outback of Australia, where he cannot seek knowledge, then that is a different situation. So here the author is speaking about some concession. And then he mentioned, وَلَا يُفْتِرُ بِغُبَارِ الطَّرِيقِ. Yani this is an example, and if a person is fasting and then he walks in the streets and there is a lot of dust, and the dust enters into his body, does this invalidate the fast? Can you imagine the situation? That when you are walking, for example, in a place where there is a lot of dust. So what happens normally? You will inhale in the dust, correct or not? You inhale in the dust. Before this we mentioned that anything that enters into our body cavity will invalidate our fasting. But what about any dust? This is forgiven. This is forgiven. Even though we say the dust and the particles enter into our noses, enters into our mouth. But there are certain things that is forgiven. For example, in the Middle East, there is this sandstorm. You know, sandstorm how severe is a sandstorm. I think for people who have not traveled to the Middle East and you have not any experience in sandstorm, you will be shocked and there is a sandstorm. I still remember in my first experience when there is a sandstorm and what you call it, I was shocked. Subhanallah, I said this is a sandstorm. Because it is like Qiyamah. Like you are walking in the streets and you cannot see anything. The whole atmosphere is filled with dust and particles, and it enters into your nose, it enters into your mouth. And after some time you realize that your throat, the dust is pouring inside your throat. La ilaha illallah. So normally we Singaporeans we say, if you come across this situation, the next day confirm you will have fever. Normally that is the case. But here we do not experience any such. But if a person is fasting and he is experiencing any such situation, that is forgiven. So this is where the author mentioned Ubar Tariq, the dust that comes in the streets. وَإِن تَعَمَّدَ فَتْحَ فَمِهِ. Even he purposely opened his mouth. He knows that there's a lot of dust and he purposely opens his mouth. And he knows that the dust will enter into his mouth. The fasting is still valid because this is forgiven. Even though he intentionally opened his mouth. All clear inshallah? طيب. وَلَا بِبَلْعِ رِيقِ طَاهِرْ الْخَالِصِ min ma'dinihi wa in akhrajahu ala lisanihi. If a person swallows saliva, even though he collect the saliva until the saliva fill up in his mouth, and then after that he swallow it, this does not invalidate fasting. And likewise if he take out his tongue and puts back inside. Why the author gives this example? Because when you take out your tongue, what happens? The saliva that is on your tongue now is out of the boundaries of your mouth. And then you put in your tongue back in. Does this invalidate fasting? No, it does not invalidate fasting, because this is not considered to be consuming something that is from the outside. Unless if you spit out and then you put back the saliva into your mouth, then it invalidates any fasting. Because now when the saliva goes out of your mouth, then it becomes something that is outside the boundary of your mouth. So when you put back again, now this invalidates any fasting. But as long as the saliva is inside your mouth, it does not invalidate the fast. Clear inshallah? So this is the example that the author is saying. If you have any questions, inshallah, and at the end of the class, just we can have any Q&A as per normal. So I will just go through inshallah. وَيُفْتِرُ بِجَرِ الرِّيقِ بِمَا بَيْنَ الْأَسْنَانِ لِقُدْرَتِهِ عَلَى مَجِّهِ وَبِالنُّخَامَةِ كَذَلِكَ. Then the author mentioned, if a person, for example, using the tongue, and he rub in between the teeth, and then he swallow that saliva, this can invalidate fasting. Why? Just now we mentioned that swallowing any saliva does not invalidate fasting. Meaning saliva that is khalis. That is why he used the term ariq al-khalis. Al-khalis min ma'dinihi. And if it is pure saliva does not invalidate fasting. But why if you use your tongue and you rub in between your teeth and you swallow that saliva, that can invalidate your fast? The reason is that saliva now mixes with other particles. So when it mixes any with other particles, now you are eating something. You are eating something. But if it is original saliva, it does not invalidate. It does not invalidate your fast. وَبِوُصُولِ مَاءِ الْمَضْمَضَةِ الْمَاءِ الْمَضْمَضَةِ when we take wudu. Yani when we take wudu, any gargling. If a person does any gargling, and then the water enters into his throat, this invalidates any the fast. This invalidates the fast. So when you are fasting, how do you gargle? How do you put the water in your mouth? The way you put it is that you take the water, you do this. Just put the water inside, spit out. Put the water inside, spit out. You don't run the water inside your mouth. When you run the water inside your mouth, in Arabic we call it mubalagha. Now this is makruh. And if you happen to swallow it, then it invalidates your fast. So we have to be careful. وَبِوُصُولِ الْمَاءِ الْمَضْمَضَةِ الْجَوْفَ إِنْ بَالَغَ فِي غَيْرِ نَجَاسَةٍ. Yani in balagha meaning gargling. Yani you put in water inside your mouth and then you make movements. This is a problem, because if any of the water enters into your throat, it invalidates the fast. وَبِغَيْرِ مُبَالَغَةٍ مِنْ مَضْمَضَةٍ لِتَبَرُّدٍ أو رابعا أو عبث وبتبين الأكل نهارا لا بالأكل مكرها. طيب, now the author gives so many example. The author is saying, before that he mentioned in balagha fi ghayri najasatin. Now all these things he has to be explained. And there are certain things that is quite subtle in the words of the author. Now when we go back to mubalagha, now he is saying that if you do mubalagha, what is mubalagha? Mubalagha meaning you gargle. Gargling is mubalagha. If you do mubalagha and you put in water inside your mouth and you do this gargling, if any of the water enters into your body's cavity, the throat, in this case, then your fasting becomes invalidated. But he said, min ghayri najasa. What is the meaning of min ghayri najasa? Unless he's saying that there is filth in your mouth, and you do mubalagha to remove the filth from your mouth. If you happen to swallow some water, that is forgiven. So even in mubalagha there is forgiveness. When the forgiveness come, if you do mubalagha because of the presence in your filth. Why there is forgiveness in this situation? Because removing filth from the body is wajib. Removing any filth from the body is wajib. Meaning if you have filth on any parts of your body, it is compulsory upon you to cleanse yourself. In Islam, it is not permissible for us to dirty our body with filth for no reason. Even if a person say, but I'm not praying, I'm just for fun. A person takes urine, for example, puts urine on his clothes. But he said, later when I pray, I will wash. We say it's haram. Even if you're not praying. Why? Because we have principle in fiqh. At-talattukhu bin najasati haram. Putting any filth on our body without any reason is prohibited in Islam. So when it comes to removing any filth, there is forgiveness. When a person does any gargling for the sake of removing any filth, if that is the case, then if the remnants in your water that is swallowed in that process, that is forgiven. But if there is no filth, that is not forgiven. Then if a person is gargling, he said litabarud. Tabarud any meaning a person is hot. So he put in water into his mouth and he gargled because he wants any coolness. And then accidentally he swallowed some of the water. Now there is no forgiveness in this situation. Because this is not something that is compulsory upon him. We ask what is the ruling of tabarrud? Tabarrud meaning to make yourself cool. We say it is mubah. And it is permissible. But it is not any something that is emphasized in Islam, not something that is compulsory. So if a person does gargling because of keeping himself cool, in a cool state, then it is not any forgiven if he swallow parts of the water. Likewise, if he gargle the fourth time, rabi'an. Why? Because the sunnah is 3 times, right? Yani when we cleanse our mouth in wudu, sunnah is 2-3 times. But what happens if a person does 4 times? Now, if he does 4 times and he accidentally swallow the water, it is not any forgiven. The fasting becomes invalidated. Because why? Because it is not a sunnah. You need to do it the 4th time. And then he mentioned aw abathin meaning for no reason. He takes water, he put water inside his mouth, and he places the water inside the mouth. Then accidentally he swallowed. This invalidates the fast. Because why? Because he does it without any reason. So there is no forgiveness in this situation. وَبِتَبَيُّنِ الْأَكْلِ نَهَارًا لَا بِالْأَكْلِ مُكْرَهًا. Yani a person, for example, when he wants to break the fast, he listens to the wrong radio. Sometimes this happens. So he listened Allahu Alam to radio in Indonesia, for example in Medan. So Medan or in Bali and is closer to the east. So down there they will break fast any earlier because of the setting of the sun, correct, no? Yeah, they break that side of the world. I think they break fast any earlier than us. So if a person, for example in Singapore, follow the timing of Bali, there is adhan, setting of the sun, it happens in Bali, and he break his fast in Singapore. And then after that he discovered that I made a mistake. What happens now? Do we say it is forgiven? I hope you understand the situation. Yani a person mistakenly break his fast. Mistakenly. This is intentionally, correct? Not intentionally, but mistakenly. Mistakenly but intentionally. Now the fasting is not valid. But if a person unintentionally eat, unintentionally we say it's forgiven. For example, and he wakes up in the morning, he forgot that he's fasting, and he eats food, we say this is forgiven. Why? Because this is unintentional. But here the situation is different. This situation is intentional. Now he wants to break his fast, but he made a mistake of breaking any fast in a different timing. So in this situation, khalas, and if we say you have to pay back the fasting, you have to pay back the fasting, your fasting is not valid. So that is why when we break our fast, we have to be careful. Especially sometimes when you are in the masjid. If you break your fast in the mosque, because I used to break fast in a particular masjid. You know what happens before the muazzin does the adhan, some jama'ah they broke their fast. Some people they thought they just based on their watch. So they see the calendar. Okay, today Maghrib time is 7:17. Okay, once my watch is 7:17, I break my fast. So we say the muazzin haven't do the azan yet. You say, but my watch says so. So these are some of the things that we have to be careful, because any mistakes and all these things will make, mashallah, and you fast from the morning till night, till sunset, it can be gone to waste. There is a situation in one of the mosques, the muazzin and he made a mistake. La ilaha illallah. The muazzin and he does the adhan before the time of the all these things happen. Sometimes it is fault of the jama'ah, sometimes it is fault of the muazzin. So sometimes all these things we have to be careful. وَبِتَبَيُّنِ الْأَكْلِ نَهَارًا لَا بِالْأَكْلِ مُكْرَهًا. But what happens if a person is mukrah? Mukrah meaning force. A person comes into a person and says that if you don't break your fast, I will kill you. And he pointed a gun at his head. He said, if you fast, I kill you. You must eat now. Otherwise, you are dead. So this person eats and drinks and then after that, what happens? Can he continue his fast? Yes, he continue his fast. Because why? This is in a state where he doesn't have any option. And this is between life and death. It is forgiven. It is forgiven. But of course, our scholars mentioned there are conditions of fasting. If a small boy comes to you with a penknife and tells you, if you don't break any of fast, I will poke you. You say, no, this one cannot. This one, you have to do something. You need to continue in your fasting. Because why? Because you can prevent it yourself. Because we have to look at the situation. But if a person comes with a gun, khalas, we say gun. This is life and death. But if a person is weaker than you, for example, you are a big person, and that person is small. And then when you look at his situation, he cannot carry out what he's saying. For example, his hand, he said that if you don't break your fast now, I will do something that you will regret. But we don't see any danger here. Now in this situation, we say this is not fast. If you break your fast, your fasting becomes invalidated. So there are conditions of fasting. This is also mentioned by our fuqaha. Because fasting also, there's a lot of chapters in fiqh. Even in talaq, for example, if a person is forced to divorce his wife, does the talaq occurs? Again, our fuqaha will speak about the conditions in fasting. Does the person has the ability to incur harm or does not incur harm? Or does this harm can result into death or a serious disease and all these things? This is also mentioned in other chapters. Al-Khamis, number 5, number 6 and number 7. These are the conditions. Conditions on the obligation. So number 5, al-Islam an-naqa' anil hayd wal nifas wal aql fi jami' an-nahar. Yani, we say that if a person is a Muslim, then only the fasting is valid. If a person is non-Muslim, fasting is not valid. There are non-Muslims who fast. Nowadays is common. Non-Muslims when it comes into Ramadan, some of them say, I want to feel how any Muslims fast. You find in YouTube, for example, some of these YouTubers, they do a challenge. They say, I will fast and then I will give a feedback. So after spending the whole day fasting, after that they will give their opinion. So we say that since they are non-Muslims, their ibadah is not valid. There is a principle in fiqh, ibadah from non-Muslims are not valid. Why? Why any ibadah from non-Muslim is not valid? Because ibadah requires intention. And intention from non-Muslim is not valid. If a non-Muslim say, I pray because of Allah, but he doesn't believe in Allah, is that a contradiction? Yes. Then how can you worship the one whom you yourself reject? So in this case, it is not valid. So that is why ibadah from non-Muslim is not any valid. Now the condition is that they must be Muslim, iman. An-naqa' anil hayd wal nifas. Not in the state of menses and postnatal bleeding. If a woman is having menses, she cannot fast. Likewise, any postnatal bleeding. Wal aql. A person must be in a state of mental consciousness, not insane. Mad people are not obligated to fast. If they fast, any fasting also is not valid from them. Insane, mad people. Because they don't have any mental consciousness. They cannot differentiate between what is good and what is bad. So it is not valid. Wal aqlu fi jami'in nahar. Okay, here we have to pay attention a bit. He said wal aqlu fi jami'in nahar. Point number 1, the author is saying that people who are insane, their fasting is not valid. and the fasting is not obligatory upon them. Point number 2 is if a person lost his mental consciousness. What is the example? If a person faint or in a state of coma, the fasting is invalid if he faints Jami'un Nahar. Jami'un Nahar meaning he fainted before Fajr and he became sober after Maghrib. He became sober after Maghrib. In this situation, we say this is not any fasting, even though he make the intention to fast. But this is not considered to be a valid fast. This is not considered to be a valid fast. Because why? He is not in a state of mental consciousness in the timings of fasting. وَلَا يَدُرُ الْإِغْمَاءُ وَسُكْرُ إِنْ أَفَاقَ لَحْظَةً مِنَ النَّهَارِ. But what happens if part of the day they become sober? Yani for example, a person, he faints before Fajr. Before Fajr he faints. But then when comes into Zohor time, for 5 seconds he became sober. Say, what happened to me? And then he faint again. All the way until after Maghrib. MashaAllah, we say that 5 seconds becomes the reason that your fasting is valid. Because he became sober, even for a moment, then the fasting becomes valid. So when comes to fainting, coma, it must encompass the whole day. If any part of the day he became sober, then the fasting becomes valid. In afaqa lahdatan minan nahar. If part of the day they became sober. وَلَا يَصِحُ صَوْمُ الْعِيدَيْنِ وَلَا أَيَّامُ التَّشْرِيقِ. It is not permissible to fast in the two Eid, yani Eidul Fitri, Eidul Adha. It's not permissible to fast. And likewise, the days of Tashriq. What are the days of Tashriq? 11, 12 and 13 Zulhijjah. These are the days of Tashriq. Eidul Adha is on the 10th of Zulhijjah. So 11, 12, 13 are the days of Tashriq. Cannot fast. وَلَا نِصْفُ الْأَخِيرُ مِنْ شَعْبَانِ. And likewise, the second part of the month of Sha'ban. Yani after day 15. When comes to day 16 onwards, you cannot fast. If you have not been fasting before that, then you cannot fast. Clear, inshallah? But if a person fasts, for example, every week he will fast on Monday. Every week on Monday he fasts. After Nisfu Sha'ban, he can fast, no problem. But if a person, it is not any part of him to fast, now when we say after Nisfu Sha'ban, you cannot fast. Now when you have to prepare for Ramadan, no fasting. Illa li wirdin. Wird here meaning the things that a person does occasionally. Yani if a person fasts before it, if a person fasts before, then it is permissible for him to continue. This is what we meant. An example I gave earlier, like if a person fasts on Mondays, after Nisfu Sha'ban, he can continue fasting on Mondays, because this is something that he does always. This is the meaning of wirdin. Aw nadrin, unless if a person make a vow, he said, I vow to fast on the 17th of Sha'ban for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this fasting becomes wajib. This fasting becomes wajib. Or a person say, if I pass my exam, I will fast. And he passes exam, khalas, we say, you must fast. Now any fasting becomes compulsory upon you. This is another. Or qada'in or kafara. Qada', this is important. A lot of people ask about qada'. Last year I did not fast some days, and I have not completed my qada until Sha'ban. I have not completed my qada. Can I fast qada after Nisfu Sha'ban? We say after Nisfu Sha'ban you cannot fast, unless if you are occasionally and you are fasting before it. But you say, but I have qada. Oh, if you have qada, then khalas, wajib, and you to fast. Now and we say wajib. Why wajib? And if a person has not made qada last year, and he has not make up any for the fasting that he missed last year, until the month of Sha'ban, we say it is wajib for you to fast now. Why? Because if you delay until the coming of Ramadan, you are sinful. Correct, no? Delaying qada until from Ramadan to Ramadan, it is haram, and you have to pay fidyah. Clear, inshallah? With the condition that you have the ability to fast. You have the ability to fast. So after Ramadan, and last year you have Shawwal. You have after Shawwal, Zulqa'dah, Zulhijjah. You have how many months and you have? But a person and he purposely and he doesn't want to fast. A person say later, khalas, and until this Sha'ban and he comes, he haven't any make up any for the fasting. Now and we say you got no choice, you must fast. Fasting becomes wajib upon you now. Making up any of the fast. Aw kafara. A person has kafara. Kafara, for example, and he swear in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By Allah, he said, I will never do this action. And then after that, and he does it. We say, now and you have to pay the kafara, ya akhi. Because you swear in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You swear in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this person say, I cannot free a slave, and I got no money, I need to pay the miskin. So what happens? You have to fast 3 days. You have to fast 3 days. We say this is kafara. Fasting any kafara. Or fasting any because any of a person has sexual intercourse with the wife in Ramadan, intentionally in the day. There is kafara to sawm. Yani he has to fast 2 months any continuously. 2 months, 2 months any continuously. Then it is wajib upon him to fast even after nisfu Sha'ban. Aw wasala ma ba'da nisfi bima qablahu. Wasala ma ba'da nisfi bima qablahu. Yani before nisfu Sha'ban, he fasts. Yani he fasts on 11, 12, 13 for example, 14, 15, and he say, I want to continue. Okay, now you can continue because you started before nisfu Sha'ban. So you can continue. But for those who have not been fasting, and then after nisfu Sha'ban and he wants to fast, now you say you cannot fast. Because why? Because you have not been fasting. So now when we go on into the next page, the author mentioned chapter on conditions which makes fasting obligatory. So he said, Faslun shartu ma yajibu alayhi sawmu Ramadan al-aqlu wal-bulughu wal-islamu wal-itaqatu. Now the author he speaks about what are the conditions that makes fasting obligatory. What are the conditions that makes fasting obligatory? Point number 1 is al-aql. The person has intellect. So mad people fasting is not compulsory. Al-bulugh. The person has reached puberty. Al-Islam, that he is a Muslim, not a non-Muslim. Al-itaqa. Al-itaqa meaning a person has the capacity to fast, ability, physically he is fit and need to fast. وَيُؤْمَرُ بِهِ الصَّبِيُّ لِسَبْعٍ. This is based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when it comes into prayers. مُرُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ بِالصَّلَاةِ. Command your children to pray when they are 7 years old. So ulama he mentioned that based on qiyas, fasting also 7 years old. When the children reach 7 years old, we have to command them to fast. But there is a difference between fasting and prayers. Fasting we have to add another condition. That condition is itaqa. That we have to look at this child, and we ask this question: does this child has the ability to fast or doesn't have the ability to fast? If your child, for example, 7 years old and skinny, and then the doctor says that this child, if you make him fast, there is a possibility he might be sick. Okay, then we say no need to fast. No need to fast. Fast half a day. This thing about fasting half a day is just training. Just training. Because some children they cannot take it. So we should not impose strictly any on children. These are some of the things also we have to be careful. Because otherwise we will do any damage to them. So some parents what they do is they let their child fast. Never mind, just fast. But if you really cannot take it, break your fast. If you really cannot take it, break your fast. This is like a training. Then slowly, when the child 8 years old, 9 years old, okay, now the child becomes healthier, stronger. Then we give motivation. Some parents they say if you fast, then you get certain present, certain chocolate and all these things. So this motivate any children to fast. But normally children 7, 8 years old they can fast. But anything that is less than 7 years old, these are the things we also we have to know. It is not encourage for us to command them to fast. Do not be imposing even any children 5 years old tell them to fast. Correct or not? But we just encourage, just try in a way maybe 1 hour or 2 hours just to get the feeling, that is okay. But we should not be imposing on children or commanding to fast if they have not reached 7 years of age. Then the author mentioned وَيُضْرَبُ عَلَى تَرْكِهِ لِعَشْرٍ إِنْ أَطَاقَهُ. If the child reaches 10 years old and he doesn't want to fast, the parents said he can beat him. This is also based on the hadith pertaining to prayers, right? This is based on qiyas. Because the Prophet ﷺ, when he speaks about prayers, command your children to pray when they are 7 years old. وَضْرِبُوا عَلَيْهَا بِعَشْرٍ. And beat them if they reach 10 years old and they do not want to pray. So beat them. What is the meaning of beating here? How do we beat children? This is also the thing we have to understand. Not beating them like what we can imagine. But beating in a way that we do not break any bones, we do not cause spill any of blood, no bruises, and not at places that are vulnerable. Meaning you cannot beat, for example, at the joints. The head and the face haram to beat. You see, sometimes in our culture in Singapore, some parents, whenever their children do something wrong, they slap the face. Do they know that this is haram in Islam to slap in the face of a human being? It is not permissible at all. It is haram to slap the face of children. In Islam, even faces of animals you cannot slap. Animals. If you have a cat, for example, you cannot slap the faces of animals. If you have a horse, donkey, it is haram to slap any faces. But sometimes in our culture, this is a problem that we're facing. Parents when they are angry, they slap any faces and they slap the head. This is haram in Islam. This is not permitted. The Prophet ﷺ specifically mentioned this, that it is not permissible. But when it comes to beating, where do we beat? We beat at places that that harm is not severe. For example, in this part of the body, like caning this part of the hand, or the back of the feet, or the legs. That is permissible, but with the condition there is no bruises. Not until it becomes blue-black, for example. Or worst case, it becomes that there is blood. This is not permissible. This is not tarbiyah, but this is violence. This is violence that is prohibited. So the beating on children is the beating of ta'deeb. It is based on nurturing. So that is why the Prophet ﷺ, when he speaks about beating, he says, "Darban ghayra mubarrih," yani a beating that is not severe. And then the condition of beating is that in ataqahu, if the child that is 10 years old has the ability to fast. But if the child who have reached 10 years of age does not have the ability to fast, you cannot beat them. Because they cannot fast. فَصْلٌ وَيَجُوزُ الْفِطْرُ بِالْمَرَضِ الَّذِي يُبِيحُ التَّيَمُّمُ. I do not know whether in this class, in last lesson I mentioned about the sickness. Sickness and that make tayammum valid. How many are there? Number one, the sickness and that result in death. And for example, if a person say, if I fast, I will die. The doctor said that if you fast, you will die. So you cannot fast. This number one. Sickness and that leads to death. Number two, sickness and that can lead to dysfunction any of the body parts. For example, if a person fasts, he can become deaf. Then it is not wajib for him to fast. Number three, if the sickness can cause change in skin color, then this is permissible for him not to fast. Number four, if it prolongs the sickness. For example, if a person is having fever and he say, I can fast, but if I fast, my fever will be prolonged. Meaning, for example, if I don't fast within 3 days, inshallah, everything will be okay. But if I fast, it becomes 5 days. Now it is not wajib for you to fast. Not wajib for you to fast. Because why? It prolongs the cure. But if a person say, no matter what, I want to fast, can he fast? And if, for example, if doctor say that if you fast, instead of 3 days, 5 days, you're cured. But he said, no matter what, I want to fast. In this situation, he can fast. In this situation, he can fast. And he is given the choice, whether to fast or not to fast. But it is not wajib upon him to fast. So this is the meaning of sickness that makes tayammum permissible. This is where the author mentioned. He said, وَيَجُوزُ الْفِتْرُ بِالْمَرَضِ الَّذِي يُبِيهُ التَّيَمُّمْ, yani a sickness that makes tayammum permissible. So these are the four. وَلِلْخَائِفِ مِنَ الْهَلَاكِ, and a person he's afraid that he will perish. And if he fasts, he will faint. وَلِغَلَبَةِ الْجُوعِ وَالْعَطَشِ, a person too hungry and too thirsty, he can break the fast. If he becomes extreme, it can result in loss of consciousness, and it can result in serious diseases. Then he can break the fast. وَلِلْمُسَافِرْ سَفَرًا طَوِيلًا مُبَاحًا, and for musafir also they can break their fast if their journey is a long journey. Long journey meaning what? Meaning anything that is more than 2 marhala is considered to be long journey in our madhab. So how far is 2 marhala? 2 marhala is about 86 kilometers. 86 to 90 kilometers. So if the destination is more than 86 kilometers, then you have the choice to fast or not to fast. For example, if you go to KL, if you go to Kuala Lumpur, is more than 86 kilometers. But in order for you to get the concession, you have to leave Singapore before Fajr. Then you are given the concession. But if you live in Singapore after Fajr, then you have to fast. But if you are musafir, for example, you are staying, for example, in Kuala Lumpur for 2 days. So the first day when you reach Kuala Lumpur, the next day you are still a musafir. The next day you can choose whether you want to fast or you don't want to fast. Clear? So this is a musafir. But when comes to musafir, the destination is less than 2 marhala, then it is not permissible. It becomes wajib for you to fast. But which is better, fast or not fast? Even you are given the concession of not fasting, it is better to fast. Allah mentioned in the Quran, وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. If you fast, then that is better for you if you know the rewards and your fasting, especially in the month of Ramadan. إِلَّا إِن تَرَى السَّفَرُ مِن بَعْدَ الْفَجْرِ. This is what I mentioned. If the safar or the traveling starts after Fajr, then wajib for you to fast, no matter where you go. Even you want to go to London, fair enough. Even you have musafir, but because you started off after Fajr, You take any the flight at 7 a.m. from Singapore. You have to fast. You have to fast because now it is after Fajr. Clear, inshallah? So if a person, for example, leaves Singapore before Fajr, you want to go to Kuala Lumpur and you leave the border of Singapore at 4 a.m. So once you leave any the border, you are musafir. And then comes any the time of Fajr. Now you have the option whether you want to fast or not fast. وَالصَّوْمُ فِي السَّفَرِ أَفْضَلُ إِنْ لَمْ يَتَضَرَّوْا بِهِ. The author mentioned fasting in Safar is better if a person and he can fast, especially nowadays. Nowadays everything is good. Last time many people, when they travel, they ride donkeys and camels. And they have to cross any desert, no aircon, no fan. La ilaha illallah. 90 kilometers in the desert is no joke. If any one of you have traveled in the desert, and you will know, you will appreciate those people any of the past, and when they travel in the desert, walking, it requires a lot of physical strength. It is no joke, because in the desert is another level. Especially like deserts where there are sand dunes. You know when you walk in those kind of deserts, your feet will enter inside the sand. So you will have, even to walk 10 meters, you will be perspiring already. 10 meters. And if it is in the time of summer, the temperature can reach 45 degrees. People say that if you travel like this, 45 degrees in the desert, you can pass away. People literally die. So that is the situation last time. But today, mashallah, even today when people travel in the desert and they use this Land Rover 4x4, everything is aircon and nice. So if we can fast that is better. Even we are traveling. But last time it is different. When people cross any deserts, and they might not have the capacity to fast. Because it can lead to death. وَإِذَا بَلَغَ الصَّبِيُّ أَوْ قَدِمَ الْمُسَافِرُ أَوْ شُفِيَ الْمَرِيضُ وَهُمْ صَائِمُونَ حَرُمَ الْفِطْرُ. This is a very important thing. Especially like, for example, if you are musafir and then you are reaching in Singapore. So a person might be saying, but I'm musafir, I have the option to fast or not to fast. So this person is thinking in the aeroplane, should I fast or not fast? Fast and or not fast? Then the aeroplane landed in Singapore, Changi Airport. Now we say, wajib wajib for you to fast. Because once you land in Singapore, you are muqim, you are mustawtin, you are not musafir anymore. You are not anymore musafir anymore. Because you made the decision late. You are in doubt whether you want to fast or doesn't want to fast. But if a person is a musafir and he decided not to fast, and then he landed in Singapore, and the people in Singapore are fasting, what happens? Can you imagine? For example, you are from Jeddah, you are musafir, and you are not fasting. For example, you are musafir, you are not fasting. But then when you land in Singapore, you land at 5 p.m. Ramadan time. And the people in Singapore are fasting, correct or not? And you are not fasting because you are musafir. But now you are not a musafir anymore. You have reached in your homeland. What must you do? What must you do? You have to observe imsak. You have to observe any imsak, because now you are not any fasting, but you cannot eat and drink. You cannot be saying, but I just now eat McDonald's already in Jeddah. I'm not any fasting. But because you are in a place where people are fasting, and you are not a musafir anymore, so you cannot eat and drink. You have to observe any imsak all the way until sunset. Then you can eat. But here the situation is musafir who is fasting. Musafir fasting, land in Singapore. Now he cannot break his fast. Wajib for him to continue. Wajib. This is what the author is saying. And likewise, balagha sabi, a child has not reached puberty. and he is fasting. While he is fasting, he reached puberty. Can you imagine? While he is fasting, he reached puberty. So we say it is wajib for you to continue to fast. You cannot break any of your fast. Can you understand where is the rationale? Where the author is taking us? The author wants us to think. If you have a situation anywhere a child and he is fasting, now when we ask the question, is fasting compulsory upon a child who has not reached puberty? Not compulsory, correct? No? But if the child and he fasts, and while fasting and he reaches puberty, now when he fasting and he becomes compulsory, he cannot break his fast. He cannot break his fast. Likewise, I read the Musafir earlier. Aw shufi al-marid, a person who is sick. A person who is sick, he has the option to fast or not to fast, and he chose to fast. But then while he is fasting, he becomes well. What happens now? Now the ruling changed. Now he becomes well, fasting becomes compulsory upon him. He cannot break his fast. Because the sickness has disappeared. The sickness has disappeared. وَإِلَّا أُسْتُحِبَّ الْإِمْسَاكِ أُسْتُحِبَّ الْإِمْسَاكِ. Yani if a person, for example, he is sick, and a person he does not fast, and then while he is in the day, he becomes well. So in this situation, we say, it is sunnah for him to observe imsak. What is any imsak? Imsak, and yes, what I mentioned earlier, it is basically to avoid doing anything that breaks any the fast. So now when we have reached 10 o'clock, so we have one last lesson to finish all these pages. If you have the book, we are still in page 162. So looking at the speed, today I cover how many page? 2.5. 2.5. So in our last lesson, inshallah, I will have to speed up a bit. So Ustaz, how is it? Should we have the Q&A now, or I can continue a bit? Or we should stop?
I think we should have Q&A.
Okay, inshallah. Okay. Is there any questions?
I have a question relating to when the person is unable to continue his fasting, then is permissible to, he or she is permissible to just break his fast?
Yeah, if a person, for example, is unable to fast, and fasting will cause harm to him, then it is permissible for him to break the fast, and it is compulsory for him to make up after Ramadan. No questions? There's one question there. Behind.
So ask voices to Fatimah Musafiru about the Musafir with regards to when you mentioned about that on Singapore. Does it apply to when you are already entering Singapore's airspace? Because you mentioned about landing China on itself. Does it apply to?
Yeah, it applies only to airspace. Yeah, because the thing is, once we reach our homeland, so our homeland and it refers only to the borders of our country. So when it comes into Singapore is an island, so no problem. It's easy for us to know the borders of our country. Yeah, so whether we are speaking about airspace or we are speaking about land, we are not a Musafir anymore. Yeah. Yeah.
The 5th, 6th, and 7th, when you say about taking for intoxication here refers to.
I didn't speak about intoxication. Intoxication and is when a person, for example, he eat some form of drugs, some medication, and he lost his consciousness. He lost his consciousness. He became intoxicated. Likewise, when a person drinks liquor. So there is a difference between fainting and intoxication. Fainting, totally lost in his senses, correct? No? But when it comes into intoxication, and we can imagine, for example, a person who is drunk. A person who is drunk. So this person is lost in his consciousness. If he lost in his consciousness, the fasting and it becomes invalidated. The fasting and it can become invalidated if it encompasses the whole day. That's what we mentioned. When it comes into loss of consciousness, yani from before Fajr and until any Maghrib. But when it comes to sleeping, no. If a person sleeps before Fajr and wakes up after Maghrib, can you imagine? Before Fajr, sleeping beauty. Yani. Before Fajr, he sleeps all the way after Maghrib. Valid or not fasting? Is the fasting valid? Here we say the fasting is valid. Why? There is a difference between sleeping and fainting. You see, sleeping, a person sleeps, but he is mentally conscious. Meaning, if you wake him up, he can be sober. But fainting and is different. Fainting and you cannot wake him up, because he lost in his consciousness. So when it comes to sleeping, a person is still mentally conscious. Clear, inshallah? Coma. No, coma is fainting. Yeah, coma is fainting. And those who are in the coma, fasting is not compulsory upon them. No qada. Why? Because the condition of the obligation of fasting is what we mentioned, al-aql, that a person possess mental consciousness. But if a person in coma for the whole month, meaning now their minds cannot function already. So fasting is not compulsory upon them. So after their coma, there is no qada. There is no qada. Wallahu a'lam bis-sawab. Yeah. There is one question. Okay. Arwah adik. Antamnya adik meninggal. Oh. Ranjat. So inshallah we have any request to recite Surah Al-Fatiha, and we make dua to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for one of the participants and the brother who just passed away. The name is Arif Haritha bin Fatur Rahman. Last Friday he passed away. So inshallah we recite Surah Al-Fatiha, make dua, may Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala forgive him and bless his soul and his mercy, and may Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala protect him from all forms of punishments, and gather him with an-nabiyyin wa siddiqeen wa shuhada wa salihin. May Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala bless him with goodness and blessing. And we pray to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala also, Allah bless all of us with doors of understanding, doors of mercy, and bless us with afiyah, and make us rich in Ramadan in the state of health, good health, and in the state where we receive the bounties of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. With this intention, we recite in Surah Al-Fatiha. Wa ila hadrat Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa radana sahabati ajma'in. Allahumma inna nas'aluka al-'afwa wal-'afiyah wal-mu'afata ad-da'ima fi ad-din wa ad-dunya wal-akhirah. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridaka wal-jannah wa na'udhu bika min sakhatika wan-nar. Allahumma inna nas'aluka min khayri ma sa'alaka minhu 'abduka nabiyyuka Muhammadun sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wa nasta'idhuka ma sta'adaka minhu 'abduka nabiyyuka Muhammadun sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ziyadatan fi ad-din وبركة في الأمر وصحة في اللسان وسعة في الرزق وتوبة قبل الموت وشهادة من الموت ومغفرة بعد الموت وعافية من اللسان أمانا من العذاب نصيبا من الجنة وارزقنا النظر إلى وجهك الكريم صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الحمد لله